Good afternoon, or morning, I guess still. My name is Morgan Lawrence. I am the co-coordinator for American Democracy Project, and we want to thank you all for coming to our Times Talk today. Today's presenter will be Dr. Norman Caulfield, and he is going to be talking about low-wage America. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. This presentation, of course, is part of my overall research and that I've been working on for quite some time. Hopefully it will come to fruition here, not too much in the distant future. But low-wage America, this is a hot topic. There's a lot of discussion in all kinds of circles about wages and why they're not rising. With an economy that's supposed to be in recovery, it's in recovery, and we're going to talk about that, but it's a weak recovery. But since it's April 1st, I thought that I would start off with these pictures. Warren Buffett, of course, everybody knows who Warren Buffett is, but some of you probably don't know who this guy is. How many of the younger students know who this guy is? Well, his name is W.C. Fields, right? And he was a comedian slash actor, right? And the reason why I picked him out is because he looks a lot like Warren Buffett. Take the glasses off Warren, but they both got a little bit of rosacea. W.C. Fields, and of course, his reputation was he was a drinker, but he really didn't drink that much. But he acted like he was drunk. But the thing is, Warren Buffett, on David Letterman, oh gosh, a few years ago, there was talk about class warfare in the United States. And David Letterman asked Warren Buffett, well, do you think there's anything to this stuff, this talk about class warfare? And Warren Buffett's response is, well, you're damn right that there is. There's class warfare going on, and my class is winning. So, you know, and then the other reason why I put W.C. Fields up there is because in the past I've given presentations. I remember 10 years ago or so in Germany, I had somebody comment on one of my presentations, and it was an Englishman, an industrial relations expert. He said, Norman, he goes, your presentation is just way too depressing. So I'm trying to kind of inject some humor into this a little bit if we can. Of course, here's the guy who talked about class warfare. Workers of the world unite, the proletarian world revolution. But more importantly for this presentation, I'm going to talk about Karl Marx in a different context, and that is the creation of a reserve army of labor in the United States, which he said capitalist systems tend to create. Okay? So we'll go down. Now, he's the, of course, European version of class warfare. The Warren Buffett slide is the American version of it because so far it's been one-sided, as Warren Buffett pointed out. My class is winning. And we're not just winning a few battles, we're winning all of them. Okay? So the next one is the American version of the labor side of class warfare, and this is Jimmy Hoffa. Don't let any man in your cab, your home, or your heart unless he's a friend of labor. Now, Jimmy Hoffa was president of Teamsters Union, and he was around when labor was a little bit more feisty than it is today. Okay. So, you know, that's the best version of class warfare, at least in a contemporary setting, meaning going back 40 years or so, that I could come up with to illustrate that. So, since this is a New York Times event, Times Talk, I decided to start this with a blog entry by New York Times columnist David Leonhardt. And this is in January 17th of this year. Driving the Obama tax plan, the great wage slowdown. And he says, wages and incomes for most Americans have now been stagnant for 15 years. That might be an understatement. Okay, I kind of take this back to like 1978, 79. But here's what's important in terms of what he says. They rose at a mediocre pace for much of President Bush's tenure in the 2000s before falling sharply during the financial crisis that dominated the end of his presidency. Leonhardt claims that Obama helped break the back of the crisis. Well, we could have a whole PowerPoint presentation on debating that. However, he adds the recovery on his watch has been decidedly mediocre too, especially in terms of paychecks. Leonhardt notes further, there is little modern precedent for a period of income stagnation lasting as long as this one. Official records don't exist before World War II, but the best estimate is that the Great Depression may be the only other modern time in which incomes for most households in the United States have grown so slowly, or not at all for so long. So first he says the last 15 years, then he starts making comparisons to the Great Depression. So that's something to debate and talk about as well. Now we get into the hard facts. You know, Leonhardt says this. Well, this is compensation of employees, wage and salary accruals as a percentage of gross domestic product. Okay? And this is a Fred chart. You go on the Federal Reserve website and they have all kinds of Fred charts. Generally, this is out of the St. Louis Fed. They do this research. And so these are, you know, pretty valid statements that I'm putting up here. And here we go, wages as a share of GDP. This is kind of a, and the shaded areas here show you where recessions are. But if you look at this, the post-World War II boom in the United States sort of peaked in the late 60s. If you look up there near the top, then it starts going down. That's why I say that wage stagnation is longer than the last 15 years. I disagree with Leonhardt's assessment of that. But then we go all the way down here. Now, something else I want to point out is that wages as a share of GDP, in the last 9 years, GDP has not risen above 3%. Okay? And the last time you're going to see that is during the Great Depression. In fact, the trend growth in the post-World War II period was, oh gosh, anywhere between 3.5%, 4%. Anything below that was considered bad. Okay. So now we're not getting growth that even reaches close to 3%. I think last year was 2.4, the final reading on the fourth quarter of GDP came in. So the question is, well, why is this the case? Well, and a big part of that answer is that as a share of GDP, wages are not there. So in other words, there is a correlation between wage growth and GDP growth. Okay. Now, this is another chart here, and this just kind of is good to illustrate what's happened since 2008 when Lehman Brothers collapsed and the Great Recession began. And these are, you know, the light blue is production non-supervisory workers, and then the darker blue is all non-farm employees, and we can see that wages have taken a significant hit. Now, they've tapered off a little bit, but still, in historical terms, they're not doing too well. Now, those are nominal wages. These are real in terms of group. Now, you know, last night it was inequality for all. Robert Reich. Gary, you said you saw that last night. 4 people showed up. Well, unfortunately, that more people should have showed up because he talks about inequality. Okay, and of course, wage growth has a lot to do with inequality. Last year, Thomas Piketty comes out with an important book called Capital in the 21st Century. It's widely debated and discussed. And he talks about inequality. Of course, that's what capital is. So the top 1%, and then you have the bottom 90%. This is what's going on. And real, meaning adjusted for inflation by wage group. 1979, And that's where I really go back to. This goes to 2013. So you can see a flat line for wages for 90%, and then for the 1%, you see a meteoric rise in wages. Here is even a better way to look at it historically. You go back to 1913, and this goes up to 2010. But you see, during the years of the New Deal and all the way through the post-World War II boom, things were a lot more equal. Okay? And then we see this inequality once again, that is income falling to the top. You go back to 1929, and it was at its highest peak, and that was the year of the stock market crash, which helped to trigger the Great Depression. Well, and then we talk a lot about the middle class. You know, if you listen to politicians, they never use the term working class anymore. Everything's middle class. And then that, in the context of the middle class, is shrinking year by year. You know, so middle class wages are stagnant. Middle class wage workers' hourly wages up 6% since 1979. Low wage workers, wages are down 5%, while those with very high wages saw a 41% increase. Okay. So this is the real wages from 1979, and here's the low wage -5, and here's the middle wage, and then the very high wages, 41%. I don't know where 4A's state would fit on this, but I don't even want to talk about it. This is very good to illustrate who does the work and who gets paid for the work. So you look at 48 to 73, productivity was up 96%, but hourly compensation was up 91%. Very even. What's happened since 73? Productivity up 74%, hourly compensation up 9.2%. Well, that's a big, big difference. Huge. So, now, you know, a lot of this is connected to the decline of unions. Okay? And we're going to talk about that just a little bit more in a minute, but I just want you to look at this. This goes 1917, so you look at during the war, 1940 or so, or the late 30s, when the Wagner Act was introduced, enabling collective bargaining. And the Wagner Act is a National Labor Relations Act, a very important piece of New Deal legislation. That's when it really peaked. And then in the 50s, it kind of tapers off. And then you have, of course, a decline ever since. Now, why is this? We're going to get into the reasons here in a moment. And this is from 1950 to 2010. In 1950, it's almost a 35% share of wage and salary workers belong to unions. Okay? But here's what this is really directly related to. If you look at this chart, this is all employees in manufacturing industries. Look at where it goes. Of course, 1960s and the 70s, late 70s, this was the heyday of American manufacturing. Starts in 1940 with the war years, and then it starts going into decline. Well, of course, we're going to talk about what's replaced manufacturing jobs. And of course, that's where the unions had much of their base, was in manufacturing. So if manufacturing goes into decline, it's obvious that union membership is going to decline. And I might just add that since 2009, wages for manufacturing workers in the United States have went down 21%. Now, a lot of that had to do with the General Motors and Chrysler bankruptcies, because auto workers took a big cut, but all of that sort of trickled down. But this is very, you know, it doesn't say much, all employees manufacturing, but it explains a lot if you look into it further. Well, the top 1% grows 138% since 1979. and then grew 15, so this is a cumulative change in real annual wages. We're going to talk more about what real means as well. Real, of course, is adjusted for inflation, but then what is the definition for inflation? And that has been changed over time. One of the things I'll say right now, I'm not going to get into detail on this right now, but you know, since Lehman Brothers and the Federal Reserve printing money doing quantitative easing, asset prices have risen, and of course that's because of all the speculation being done with the free money of the Federal Reserve. You know, we say that inflation's not even run at 2%, but I beg to differ. If you go to the grocery store in the last few years, you will see that items have went up in price significantly in some instances. And what they do is they substitute things. When things go up in price, then they say, well, that's expensive, so people aren't buying that anymore. So they take that out of the basket, the inflation basket, they put something else in. It's called substitution. And then they say, well, inflation is really not that bad. But all of it's coming from speculation and the drive up in asset prices. You know. And food is a real factor in all this and what you go to the grocery store and buy. Gasoline, not so much, particularly now, but you know, gasoline prices will go up and down, as we know. Now, this is very good because it shows what has happened in the last 7 years or so. This is educational attainment, levels of that. So we start here and we go, okay, the red line is advanced degrees. And I said I wasn't going to talk about 4-day stay. We all got faculty here, we have advanced degrees. Where are we sitting? Okay, and this is real, meaning that, yeah, well, hey, we got a 2% raise this year, 3% raise another year, but did that really cover inflation? That's a question, and my answer to that question would be no, right? Because here's where we're at, okay? We're stagnant. We're running a straight line. Then you get college, -2, okay? Then you get some college, that's even worse. Then you get high school. So, you know, this is also tied to accumulation of debt because, you know, if you're not going to college and you're not getting degrees, you're not going to earn as much, and people know that. And what are they going to do? They're going to go to college, they're going to borrow money, but are they going to be able to pay this debt off? Now, debt is a big overhang in inhibiting economic growth. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit. Got some more slides here. Now here we go, women, and this is even worse, okay? Because if you look at women with advanced degrees, they're below. And you can read this for yourself. I'm not going to get into explaining all of it. What this shows, of course, and there's been some recent releases about how much females make in comparison to males. They're still way behind, even with education and training. Now, here we go. I love this chart. Leisure and hospitality. You know, they've kind of bragged about job growth here in recent months, although today there was a report by ADP that was kind of disappointing with job growth last month. And they're going to do the job numbers on Friday like they do every month. But this is the biggest increase in any single job category. Leisure and hospitality. These are waitresses, waiters, bartenders. What's wrong with these jobs? Well, they don't pay very well. Many of them are part-time. Many of them depend on tips. You know, minimum wage for some of these people is as low as, because they're really not covered in restaurants. They're not covered by the 1938 Fair Standards and Labor Practices Act with regard to the minimum wage. So, like in some states, I was talking to somebody the other day in Ohio, where I'm from originally, and they said, well, the minimum wage for a bartender in Ohio is $2.10 an hour. $2.10. So anyway, this is where the job growth is when you look at this. Here we go, versus manufacturing workers. The blue line is manufacturing, the waiters and the bartenders are the red line. So we're trading jobs. Right? All I can say is have a drink and go see, have a dinner and go see a movie. That's where we're at. So this really explains a lot what's going on with wages. You know, and one of the categories that economists always look at, jobless claims. It comes out every Thursday. And jobless claims have been trending downward for a long time. And one of the reasons why they have is because many people are working part-time, and when they go to claim at the unemployment office, the unemployment office is not going to process a claim if they have to by law, but they're going to discourage you if you don't have enough money and enough hours to do it. So you're not eligible. So yeah, that number's going to go down because you have growth in jobs that, you know, that really prohibit you from even filing an unemployment claim when you do get laid off. Here we go. This is pretty much up to date, February 2. Here we go, leisure and hospitality. Big, like I said, big growth. Retail trade, then temp help services, then we have professional business services, temporary help. But you know what? You got to break these things down and realize, you know, what are these categories? They consist of many occupations, and education and health is one of those. So you look at education, you look at health. What is health? You know, health can be a lot of things. It could be nurses, could be doctors, could be people who clean restrooms and make beds in hospitals. You know, could be home care workers. And generally those jobs are not very good paying jobs either. In retail, I think we all know that's it. Now if you look at mining and logging, mining used to be governments went down, manufacturing's down there, so you know, it's all pretty much, in the end, leisure and hospitality, so don't worry about it, sit back and have a drink.
Norm, can I ask a question?
Just a minute. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
With the number involved with hospitality and leisure going up, and if wages for the middle class and the working class are going down, are they just spending the lesser money?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. That's a good question. But I'm going to put up some figures on debt here. Credit card debt is going way up. You go out to eat lately? How many people use credit cards? Quite a few. So, you know, and that's a good question, but I'll get to answering that more completely when I bring those numbers up. Okay. Share of employees in low-wage work. This is 2009. This goes back a ways, but the USA is in the lead, and the next country is the UK, and you got Canada. Now, this is what I was getting at when I talked about Karl Marx and the Reserve Army of Labor. Labor force participation rate. This is really went into decline. In fact, we're at 1978 levels. Labor force participation rate is about 62%. And there are about 90 million, well, there's more than 90 million now, people who should be in the labor force that aren't in the labor force. Okay. And this is why, one of the reasons why the unemployment rate looks so low. That is the U6 unemployment number. The U12 is a little bit, well, not a little bit, it's a lot. And the Economic Policy Institute, which is a Democratic Party leaning think tank in Washington, D.C., they actually come out and say You know, and they're all for Obama, and they come out and say, they go, look, there's almost 6 million missing workers, people that have given up looking for work. And they said if those missing workers were counted, even the U6 rate, which is 5.5% or whatever it is now, that would be 9.5%. And so this is really related to wages, because if you got all these people unemployed, and that's what we have here, then where is the upward pressure on wages going to come from? If you have 10 people in line waiting to take your job that'll work for the wages you're working, or even less for that matter, then where is wage growth going to come from? Everybody knows that, because they say, well, you know, when's the pressure on wages going to build up? Well, it's never going to build up. Most economists that look at this straight will tell you it's never going to build back up because of this. Yeah. There we go, 5.9 in this month's job report. And that was February. Should stand at 9%. People who either working or looking for work if job opportunities are significantly stronger. Now, here's the kicker. The EPI notes, Economic Policy Institute, notes that more than half of these missing workers are in the prime age of working, between the ages of 25 and 54. The labor force participation rate for this cohort, 25 to 54, is the lowest, and it should be the highest. Okay. So a lot of this has to do with people graduating from college and not finding jobs and having to live with their parents, et cetera, et cetera. Here we go. This tells it all. Workers aged 55 and over, and this numbers over here are telling 35, approaching 35 million. These are people that work. We are, and I'm in this category, we are the largest group participating in the labor force now, this age group. Well, why is that? Anybody got any?
Can't afford to retire.
Huh?
You can't afford to retire.
There you go. You know, one of the things that happened here in the last 30 years or so is that defined benefit pension plans have went away for the most part, and they've been replaced by 401k type plans. And what they rely on is the employee saving most of the money. So if wages are down, that's not possible. So more people, you know, I did have a photo, and I didn't want to put it up here. It had an old guy who was a greeter at Walmart. By the way, Walmart felt a necessity to raise wages. And of course, but that's all for a different reason. We'll talk about that later. I kind of want to get through this because we're going to have 30 minutes for questions. I got some questions already prepared. They asked me to do this. Here we go. Employment rates of men and women 55 up. Women, men, doesn't matter. And this only goes to 2005, so it's going up further. Here we go, part-time. This goes all the way back to 1965. It started rising up, part-time wages. Part-time jobs, but part-time wages. And Jim Clifton, he's a guy that runs the Gallup survey section. Last month he said that the unemployment rate is phony. In fact, he called it a big lie. He said because the way they define, and as Gallup defines, a good job is working 30 plus hours a week. Well, he said there's only 44% of the jobs out there right now where people are actually working 30 plus hours a week. So this is why you see the growth of part-time jobs. And 30 hours is really not a full-time job. But some of them are 40-hour jobs, but we're talking using that benchmark 30 plus. 44% are in that, and the rest of the labor force is involved in this stuff. Now, the minimum wage, there's a lot of talk about raising minimum wages, and this shows you go back to 68. and it looks at productivity of a typical worker, and basically this is the real value. If it would have grown, that's what it would be, $18.42 an hour. The real minimum wage is $7.25. Here are states with minimum wage increases in 2014, and I noticed that Kansas is kind of sandwiched there between two states. I wonder why. You know, and actually Arkansas, pretty conservative state, and Montana, and I think it was South Dakota or North Dakota, they just voted the minimum wage in the last election cycle. So you have all these states increasing minimum wage. The biggest is in Washington, the state of Washington. Well, this is the personal savings rate. It starts way back in 1948. You can see the peak of savings was when? You know, you put up all these graphs or these charts and you go, you know, they all kind of read the same. You can see where everything peaks out, and then when it starts going down, it declines. You know, and so you look at, let's see here, there was a recession in '73, the Great. You know, right after the recession, things start, savings rate. And this is all related to wage growth. If you don't make wages, you can't save money. Simple as that. You know, you boil this down, and it's really kind of simple stuff. I mean, everybody thinks economics is complex. And some of it is, if you want to get into mathematical models and things like that that really don't have anything to do with the real world, you can make anything complex. But, you know, Jim Rickards, who is an author and analyst, wrote two very timely books in recent history here. First book was Currency Wars, the second book was The Death of Money. And he said that really, when you look at an economy, it boils down to two things. One is how many people are actually working, and two, how productive those people are that are working. And he's pretty much right. So, you know, we went over all of that, and this is the savings rate. And this is another way of looking at the savings rate since 1960, the same. It's a Fred chart. It just doesn't go as far as the other one. Here we go. This is what I was talking about. Americans took on $57 billion in credit card debt in 2014. You know, I think of the Macaulay Culkin movie Home Alone. He goes to New York. He gets on the phone and he orders all this stuff like a refrigerator with a key. And I said, "What's your credit?" He goes, "Credit card? You got it." So, in March 2015, U.S. household consumer debt profile, average credit card, is household, $15,000. Average mortgage debt, $155,000. Average student loan debt, $32,000. And some change. Now, 5 years ago, median American owned $3,300 consumer debt. The average American household owed $7,768. The average indebted American household owed $17,000. So we can go back to this and check it out. Big changes, just in 5 years. So does that answer your question about eating and drinking establishments? Somewhat.
Yeah.
Well, you know, during the housing boom, you know, that was one of the things with 2008, is that the coping mechanisms that people had, and I think Robert Reich talks about that in that movie, although I haven't seen the movie, I've seen excerpts of it. He says that the coping mechanisms are now gone. You could, you know, since your house value was projected to go up, you could borrow against that.
Yeah, quickly, the coping mechanisms were more people in the household had to work.
Right.
They had to work longer hours, and then they had to go in debt. That's
longer hours.
Yeah. With this.
Longer hours means you have like 2 or 3 part-time jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, you had some significant job growth back in the 90s there. during the Clinton administration, but I always tell the joke. You know, yeah, well, have you heard about the 18 million jobs that have been created in recent years? And the answer goes like this: yes, I have, and my wife and I have 4 of them. So, kind of the same deal. Yeah.
So it has been presented countries such as Greece that has been collapsed because of like the debt that they just couldn't sustain. You know.
You're talking about Greek debt?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like country, what? Like
That was. Let me just stop you right now. That was forced on Greece, and that was very corrupt because you had leaders in the Greek government who traded things and got wealthy in exchange for bringing on the debt and bringing Greece into the euro.
Well, but like, if you look at the result, it was a debt that actually collapsed the country's economy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think America will be able to sustain increasing debt?
Well, as long as we can keep printing money, we're okay.
But you know, even like printing money is making more debt. You know.
Well, yeah, the Federal Reserve balance sheet is approaching $5 trillion.
How long can we do that?
I don't know. I'm surprised they've been able to do it this long. So I can't answer that question. But you know, it's a good question, and it leads me to think about something else, and that is, if you've been following the news, China has an Asian infrastructure development bank that they're creating, and the U.S. is trying to pressure other countries not to join it. And of course, Great Britain was the first to break ranks with the U.S. and say we're going to join the AAIB, is what it's called. And then Italy, Germany, and France joined them. Then it was Australia, and just the other day was South Korea. Now the IMF is considering making the Chinese yuan one of the world's reserve currencies. You got the Japanese yen, you have the British pound, you have the American dollar, and then you have the euro. They're thinking about including as special drawing rights the Chinese yuan. So, question of money printing, there's more and more pressure on the American dollar, even though the American dollar is very high right now. One of the reasons why the American dollar is really high right now is because the banks have all these derivative contracts, and people now are getting nervous because they think the Federal Reserve might raise interest rates. So they need dollars to pay off their contracts. So the dollar is in big demand. Okay. But what happens when the Federal Reserve doesn't raise interest rates, which I don't think they're going to do? I think they're just going to keep printing money. And of course, 0% interest, we don't get that. Only Max Kaiser, he's an analyst on this stuff. He says we have interest rate apartheid. What we have. You're not getting 0%, but some others are, right? Here's a state of the economy. Payday lenders. There are more payday lenders in the U.S. than McDonald's or Starbucks, reflecting economic conditions in which fast money is even more important than fast food. Payday lending, you pay a fee, you get an advance on your paycheck. This has blossomed over the last 20 years. There are now more than 20,000 across the country, according to the U.S. Federal Reserve in St. Louis, while McDonald's boasts 14,267 locations.
Do you know about what the average interest you pay, annual interest?
Boy, you know, I think it varies depending on where you're at.
Higher than credit cards.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, Wonga was the big one over in the UK, and they kind of cracked down on that. But one time they were charging 5,000%. So you know, let me just make a comment on this too. Is that when you build up all this debt and you have to pay on the service of the debt, this takes money out of the real economy. Ordinary individuals working, having to pay off credit card debt, payday loan debt, student loan debt, all this. This is deflationary. So, you know, the lower interest rates, they say they're fighting inflation, but they're actually causing deflation by doing this. Somebody needs to write Janet Yellen a letter and tell her this. But you know what? She already knows. They know exactly what they're doing. They're just hoping that somehow things will work out in the end.
Sounds like Kansas.
What's that?
Sounds like Kansas.
Yeah, well, Kansas is part of the equation, isn't it? Now, this is the last thing I put up here, and this is kind of a sad human interest story. This happened a while back. Maria Fernandez, 32. She had kids. She had to work 4 different jobs at 4 different Dunkin' Donuts. Well, she was so tired, she went to sleep in her car one day in a convenience store parking lot, and this gas container that she used to keep was there because she basically had a time premium on getting between shops in Harrison, Newark, and Linden, New Jersey. And she used to work like 3 shifts every day, said Parth Patel, who worked with Fernandez at the Newark Penn Station. So that's how desperate people are. Now, we're pretty comfortable here, at least for the moment. But I think it's good for us to know about these things. So anyway, did you hand out the questions? Who's got it? Oh, here they are. They asked me to make up, we have well, these are kind of like, for those of you who have them, does anybody want to ask these questions?
I got a question, Norm.
Sure.
Just your take or your thoughts. Growing up, I had a mother, she used to always say that some people have a champagne appetite and a beer budget. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. You're talking about
People living beyond their means, is that what you're talking about?
Way beyond.
Well, that's what credit cards are for.
And that's what I'm getting after, yeah. And that's why, you know, when you brought that up with the credit card debt.
Well, we're Americans, we're entitled to it. No, I mean, there's some truth in what I'm saying, right? I mean, this whole thing about being entitled to a standard of living started a long time ago.
Oh, I know.
You know, and so
you got to somehow break that. I grew up in a different mode. You know, if I wanted something, I bought it when I had the money for it.
well, you're one person.
I know, but that's what I'm saying is we got 99.9, a huge percentage of Americans today, in my mind, living way, I realize.
So you're saying they're just snoozing on the couch after they've had their champagne and their caviar?
Yeah, I'm just simply saying
No,
instead of having that.
no, I'm agreeing with you that they are snoozing on the couch.
Yeah.
I hope someday they wake up.
Yeah.
Oh, what's going on here? You know, I mean, I just got my credit card statement, and I'm not going to be able
Right.
to pay for it.
Yeah. And I just see that as
Well, you know, credit card debt was.
why also they need to pick up.
Credit card debt was actually very high in 2008, but then it went down because a lot of credit card companies basically reduced the debt. That's what was going on.
Right.
Now, in this new cycle, they've just redid it. So you think as long as you can print money and, you know, buy stuff on credit, you know, I don't know how long, like, we're running everything on credit. Look at our defense budget. How bloated that is.
The government's not being a very good role model
No.
when that's all they're doing.
Well,
federal
the government
anyway.
is cutting wages. You know,
But they're
one of
borrowing money. They're saying,
one of the
well,
qu-
we don't need to cut our expenses, we just need to borrow more money. And so it's naturally people say, well, it works
I've
for
got
the
a brother,
government.
yeah, I've got a brother-in-law. That's what, you know, you want to make more money, you borrow more money, so
You
you
look
make
at-
more money.
Hold on, look at question number 4. In 2009, the federal government bailed out much of the American auto industry. Did this event impact wages? Well, of course it did. So there's the government saying you got to make less. Right? Because it wasn't just the auto workers on the assembly line. This trickled down in the rest of the manufacturing. And I explained to you a while back that manufacturing wages are down 21% overall. Okay? So the government is doing its job. This job is to make us sacrifice and let the rich get richer, is it not? And that's the class warfare that Warren Buffett was talking about. Yeah, my class is winning. And Warren Buffett's a lot better connected with the government than any of us in this room are, right? Don't you think so? Yeah. Yeah.
It seems like more, a lot of it does come from also the middle class, that by what's promoted by the upper class, because it's like credit card and credit debt. You have to have credit in this country. If you want a job, it's not uncommon anymore for people to run your credit report. See if you're in debt.
Well, you don't have to have credit, but if you don't, they got payday loans for you. Okay? They don't run credit checks on you. All they want is a paycheck stub, the most recent one, and you can get a loan, and that paycheck stub is your collateral. Right? Or now they have places where you can, if you got a car title, well, give us your car title. And if you don't pay back the interest on this loan, then we take your car. We send out repo man.
And refinancing your home was another one that was mentioned on the video last night.
Well, that's more difficult to do. Getting a mortgage is difficult. You know, one of the things that's going on, the mortgage market around here, I've been observing, is that you have a lot of signs next to houses that are up for sale that say contract pending, sale pending. You drive by, and then 3 months later you drive by and it's the same sign. And the thing is, people are waiting to upgrade who own homes and can't sell them, the ones that they live in. So you get this whole chain reaction. And just down the street from me in Russell, Kansas, there was this house that said sale pending or contract pending, whatever, for more than a year and a half, and finally they just took the sign down. I figured, well, that was all stacked up, you see, because the student loan debt has really hurt household formation, and also first-time home buyers just aren't in the market, and they're scrutinized more, and standards are tougher for people to get mortgages.
Yeah, I think it's mostly people with significant equity in their house can refinance and pay off all their little bills and keep their standard of living, but they'll never own their house.
Well, if you want to keep your standard of living, you just got to figure out a way to borrow more.
Yeah.
It's all based on debt. But I'm telling you, debt is deflationary. See? What do they got going on in Europe? When somebody brought up Greece, whatever, what's going on over there? You got deflation going on. Official. Here they kind of say we don't, but we really do. We're afraid of it. We got deflationary pressure. We want to get inflationary pressure. Well, I'll tell you what, if they raise interest rates, they're going to have lots of inflationary pressure, because then the whole thing will collapse. People will not be able to afford to pay their debts. That's one of the reasons why they don't raise interest rates. They're caught because we have another recession, which we might have. A lot of people predicted in 2015 we will. And that's one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve wants to raise interest rates, because if the economy gets bad, then they can lower them again. But right now, where are they going to lower them? And if they do lower them right now, it'll prick the bubble, the multitude of bubbles that they've created. And this whole thing will come crashing down. I mean, if you look at the stock market, you say, well, everything's going great. I mean, that's one indicator, but what is that based on? It's based on mostly stock buybacks. General Motors, I just talked about the bailout. Well, it was just recently revealed that General Motors really went bankrupt because of stock buybacks. They've been doing this for a long time. In fact, the stock market has been relying on stock buybacks since the mid-90s, when Greenspan came in. They've been doing this. And it's accelerated in recent years. So, you go, okay, that means there's no real investment going into the real economy. Into business spending is down on capital goods and innovation and all that. And why would they want to do that? See, and then they come out with their earnings. Well, we're making money. Look at our balance sheet, basically. And so they have phony price to earnings ratio. If you were to take that out, price to earnings would be like 20–21%, which is unheard of. That's the high historical watermark.
What you just said, frankly, it went pretty much right over my head, and I don't want to assume, but probably most of the people. The reason I say that is
they're sleeping on the couch, they're snoozing, they don't know.
All this is so complex, and people are getting so many perspectives from different directions based on personal interest. It's just hard to know, because that's something that I was disappointed in Robert Reich. He did not he gave this kind of morale speech to his class at the end of the video, but he did not offer them concrete examples of how can we fix this problem, and that's what I really hope you can do.
Well, that's why I put
because,
class war up there.
Students are,
Workers gotta start fighting back.
okay, yeah.
You know, I mean, Warren Buffett said, "You're damn right, my class is winning." You know, it's been one-sided, so.
You gotta get money out of politics was, I think, one of Reich's
Yeah, well,
main
you know what?
messages. Because that's what he said, they're just, the rich have more and more power, which gives them more and more ability to rig the system in their favor, and that the only way to stop that is to get people elected that are going to make the rules more fair.
Well, it's gonna be very difficult, no matter what happens. The other thing is, I say, well, workers fight back. What organizations have? They have these unions that really don't fight back.
Yeah.
Okay. They're basically part of the problem, and I can explain that forever, but I'll just leave it at that. You know, so you've got people very isolated and atomized, and the hammer's coming down. And a lot of this is related to the decline, relative decline in the United States and the world economy.
Isn't class warfare largely manifested in policies of taxation and spending?
No,
You don't think so?
taxation. Look, let me point something out to you. Free trade agreements. I had that. Okay, they call these free trade agreements, but they're really not. Okay, what they really are agreements that allow American corporations to offshore work, okay, for lower wages. And then you look at one chart I didn't put up there, and I probably forgot, I should have, the ratio of CEO pay to an average non-supervisory worker, right? Production worker. Well, the ratio today is like 390 to 1, something like that. And these executives get all these bonuses, but where does the money come from? Well, the money comes from the difference. That's income inequality there. That's what Reich is trying to explain. But the income inequality doesn't come from tax policy necessarily. It comes from policies like we're going to offshore jobs to low-wage countries, and then what do we end up? We end up with an impoverished third-world labor force.
Yeah.
Bartenders and waitresses, as opposed to manufacturing workers. Well, you know what? Our job reports look like what India's did maybe 40 years ago. No, it's all menial, low-paying service sector jobs. That's all it is. But you got your CEOs and your others that are raking in huge paychecks and capital gains from.
Low percentages of income tax on those checks is my point.
Yeah, but okay, say what if they tax them? What would they do with the money? The government's got the money. See what I'm trying to say? It's not taxation that's the problem. It's not taxation that's the problem. It's not to do with it. What it has to do with is basically these jobs are gone that paid well, and the result is, why did they ship them over? The question is, well, so they could profit individually. Where do you think the money for these bonuses come? And these high salaries for the executives of each company. You know, you go back 30, 40 years ago, that wasn't the case. Now they had this. That's not a result of tax policy. That's basically a result of economic policy.
The video seemed to imply that because more money is given to the top, the people at the top, and they can't spend it all. They've got all this excess money, and because the people at the bottom don't have money, there's no demand for services here, which is what you need to invest money. You need demand. So what they do is they see there is demand in the other countries. So all of their money gets invested out. But if the tax system...
Well, no, there's growing demand in China, but some of these countries, Mexico, they're not supposed to increase that. You know, it's here.
Well,
but what you're seeing
is, in perfect sense to me, is that the middle class spends almost all of their income. And the lower class
goes into debt.
If you divert more money to the middle class, they'll spend it all. That's what demand. The economy is driven by demand, not supply. So if you want to stimulate,
well, where's the demand going to come from if you have these third world?
Give the middle class more money, and that's where the tax.
Well, that's where
tax the middle class.
They're trying to generate pressure downward, upward pressure for wages, but it's not happening. One,
upward pressure for wages.
Yeah, drive them up. That's what they're trying to do.
Yes,
Okay?
yes. For the middle class.
Certain elements, okay, like they're trying to get $15 an hour for fast food workers.
Yeah, more
But
paid
this
help.
is all disparate. It's not some unified response. And it won't be as long as you have all this fragmentation. I use the word atomization. You know, people are atomized, and you know what? And the other thing is, you say people are working all these hours. Yeah, they're working hard. They don't have time to even think. Like this poor woman who died in her Kia Sportage vehicle, right? I mean, she didn't have time to think about what she was even doing.
What did the government take over?
She was working at four different Dunkin' Donuts locations
Yeah.
in different cities in New Jersey.
So,
You know,
So she get higher wages, work for a job.
well, exactly. Well, you know, and you get to look at right here in Kansas, you got meat packing plants in the southwest part of the state.
have recovered.
What wages do they pay? Not very good wages, $11, $12 an hour.
Wages is a big part of it.
Well, but if they raised wages, then white Americans would probably take those jobs instead of
like foreign
Mexicans.
Yeah.
So like.
But so they're not going to raise wages. No, man, Walmart just raised them. Costco has higher wages than Walmart. But see, Walmart's a broken business model that they had to raise wages because they had such a turnover. You know, Henry
I'm just trying
Ford.
to get a grip on how to solve, and it's just very depressing when, like last
Well, I
night.
told
thought
you
I had
this
a
was
good
going to be
grip on-
depressing.
Then after this presentation,
warned you.
I'm totally lost.
That's why I put W.C. Fields up there. You can go home and watch, snooze on the couch and watch old movies of W.C. Fields. Then you won't be so depressed. But you're not depressed. You make a good salary. How can you be depressed?
Well, I mean,
It's all about me, right?
about our society, and
Yeah, I know. I'm just
you
joking.
know, we all have young family members, and it's just.
Well, yeah, I mean,
You know, I used to
we have
teach
kids, they have to go to
self-employment.
college and get good jobs, and they gotta borrow money to do that.
Well, I
And
mean,
you know,
I just-
even though they're the
main
ones in
role.
debt, I feel, you know, heavy in my heart. You know.
Yeah.
So, you know, but that's a big problem, is debt has substituted for everything. And what are they doing? When in Greece, somebody brought up Greece, they're trying to drive wages down there even further so they can pay more money. Slash their pensions. Pensions are being slashed in the United States too. Yeah. In fact,
The one value thing you
some
did
are
show,
saying that
the
municipal
more
orders shouldn't
education
even
you
have
get, the better off you'll be still.
what's that?
The more education you get, the better off you'll be. At least you'll break even.
Well, look at it this way. The more education you get, you'll be smarter. And when you're smarter, you can figure this out. Then you're depressed.
Well, I have a
Right.
PhD and I can't figure
So
it out.
what do they say? Ignorance is bliss, you know? Right?
Yeah.
No, I'm just joking around, but
No, I
you know,
mean,
yeah, well, I
you're
agree with
getting
you. More
into
education, but
Marxism
if you're
now.
educated, then you learn about this, and then you go, oh gosh, what can I do about it?
You know,
Now I'm
it's part of the
depressed.
false consciousness that it's so complicated you can't do anything about it, so just don't worry about it. Just
Well, that's what they want you to think.
enjoy what you have and don't worry about it. I mean, that's,
Hey, I got my Diet Pepsi, 7th Heaven. Got a pizza waiting for me in the fridge back there.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Got a nice warm car to sleep in.
As long as I don't have a gas can that tips over and
Yeah.
creates fumes of carbon monoxide, so I die, like that poor woman did.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to go to payday loans, at least at this point. So, feel grateful. No, I'm just kidding. But it's really kind of, you know, it is depressing. Academics tend to do depressing work. I mean, most stuff that's generated by academics, I read it and I go, well, this is kind of depressing, it's boring. Yeah.
Are there any countries anywhere in the world that are having good news? Is China?
But no, not necessarily.
Or any other
Well,
country benefiting from this whole dynamic? That, you know, low wages
well, there
here,
used to be.
and-
There used to be, but I would say that we're having global depression. You know, and one effect of that is global unrest. It seems to be everywhere. You look at the Middle East, the Arab Spring.
So rich are getting richer throughout the world.
Oh, exactly.
Those classes.
I just focus on the United States.
Not just the United States.
Well, capitalism is global, isn't it? This is the way capitalism behaves.
Just asking to confirm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I wish I had time to talk about the whole world, but I don't. Yes, sir.
What if it all just changed, like Iceland did some years ago, here in 2008? Wouldn't it just turn around and rebound?
Well, what did Iceland do for that to happen?
They borrow too much?
No. How did they get it to rebound? Did they keep their debt, or did they get rid of it?
They got rid of it.
How did they do that?
And if I remember right, they didn't pay it. Or
Yeah, that's right. You don't pay.
with
That's what the Greeks, like these guys over there at Syriza, that just don't pay and tell them you're going to go to China and Russia and take the euro and stick it where the sun don't shine. That's what I would say. Because they're saying, no, we want more. I'll say, no, not necessarily.
I'm not gonna
The terms of the deal. I mean, it's like, are you gonna sign on the dotted line if you're going to be charged 5,000% interest? Well, if you're desperate, you will. But if there are other alternatives. Anyway, I think this event is over with. I want to thank you all for coming. We didn't get to those questions, unfortunately, but I think we had some good questions anyway. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks everyone for coming. Let's give a round of applause. The next Times Talk is April the 8th, and it is over the global challenges. So if you're going to the TEDx conference, it's going to give you a good intro of what's going to be talked about there. It is from 12:30 to 1:30, and Dr. Shayla Mills will be talking. So if you guys have any questions, I'm sure he has an email or anything like that if you want to stick around.
Email? Oh, no.
No?
I get too much email. It is. I need to get this